preservation of and increased access to the 92nd Street Y Humanities Audio Archives is generously funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Revelations of his presence. Now that marks a clear distinction between a mature conception of God and an immature conception of God. If we speak of truth and justice and love as being commanded by God, and as God somehow being some kind of entity like a king or ruler who orders these attributes, then we still are in the frame of mind of traditional authoritative religion. If we want to apply to religion that same test of maturity that we do to other phases of human life, we would realize that these drives in us toward truth and justice and love are themselves the working of that process which we identify as divine or as God. Sixth, belief in divine reward and punishment, not only for social sins, but also for ritual transgressions and unbelief. A belief that many still hold is likewise a sign of immaturity. The very notion of divine retribution is an anachronism, when we have come to regard even human retribution only as a mitigated form of revenge. Doctrines like that concerning eternal torture of unbaptized children is nothing more than a vestige of sadomasochism, which the immature conscious resorts to in its ability to master the unconscious. Otherworldliness, or the assumption that man can possibly achieve his destiny in this world, is a manifestation of immaturity. It is a corollary of the belief in reward and punishment. That is to say, due to the fact that life as it is constituted does not seem to tally with our sense of justice. Therefore, we say that all the inequities of this life will be made good in a hereafter, in the other world. All of that is based on the belief in reward and punishment. And that belief itself, as I've just indicated, being an expression of immature development of the mind, cannot be accepted by the mature mind. Psychologically, otherworldliness is a rationalization for refusing or preventing to improve conditions in this world. As such, it is undoubtedly what Marx has said it is, an opiate as such. But that does not mean, again, that all religion is an opiate. Simply immature religion is an opiate. Eighth, closely related to otherworldliness is the dichotomy of body and soul, which has served as rationale for asceticism as pleasing to God. The psychological aspect of asceticism is the conscious suppression and repression of the impulses of the unconscious, due to a highly suggested self-centeredness plus masochistic submissiveness to the superego or sense of, both of which are symptoms of immaturity. To which I wish to add the following point, namely, that the freedom to think and feel without fear and guilt is an essential trait of maturity. The traditional doctrine that thoughts and feelings are wicked is conducive to neurosis. That is true of Jewish religion, of Christian religion, that to think what are regarded as impure thoughts is, in fact, in the case of the Jewish tradition, it is regarded as even worse, and the same in the New Testament, or at least just as bad as acting them out. Now that very attitude, as I believe, is conducive to neurosis. Neither hate nor envy nor lust can damage unless they are given some form of expression. If they are consciously recognized acknowledged and understood, they can be controlled and limited in their expression and even directed into constructive channels. If, on the other hand, they are buried and are rendered unconscious, they will express themselves in masked forms, which become automatic, obsessively repetitive, and destructive. Now, the particular victim, of course, of this principle, of this aspect of immaturity, is the sex impulse. The traditional attitude toward it, toward even entertaining what are regarded as impure thoughts, so-called impure thoughts, all of that is, I believe, an evidence of that force of authoritative religion, which still is a sign of immaturity. Ninth, abnormal mysticism is a perversion of normal mysticism. You see, I recognize the functioning of mysticism as part of the human mind, but the kind of mysticism that is normal, I speak of here as the inevitable reaction of the conscious to the vastness and the wonder of the world, and the realization of the gulf that divides man as he is from what he may yet become, and withal a feeling of oneness which finds expression in a sense of identity between the human person and the universal process of organicity or God. But abnormal mysticism takes on various forms which have in common the tendency to short-circuit the communion between the human person and God by ignoring the long and intricate series of natural steps that have to be taken for the feeling of oneness between them to be warranted. From all that has been said thus far, Freud's contention that religion is collective neurosis is true. So, for that matter, is all civilization a neurosis. To the extent that intelligence or reason in all civilizations is to a large extent still taboo. Freud's mistake, however, consists in being pessimistic about the potency of intelligence or reason. That is the fundamental weakness, in my opinion, in Freud's approach or conception of the human mind. Granted faith in that potency, mankind will live to have both civilizations and religions that are free from neurosis. To repudiate religion altogether is equally the result of reacting against the infantile father image, and therefore itself is immaturity. To throw out, as they say, to throw out the child with a bath, to react against religion because it has hitherto been immature is itself a sign of immaturity. However, if we may take a leaf out of psychotherapy, we must expect that the initial attempts to rid religion of neuroses are likely to aggravate the symptoms. You know, in psychotherapy, they always point out the first results are a certain aggravation of the very symptoms. And in a sense, we are liable to make, even by this kind of discussion, perhaps people feel religiously worse. That is just what is happening these days, especially among the intellectually elite, who would naturally be the first victims of the initial curative efforts, because they read and they think and they analyze themselves, so to speak. They would be the first ones to want to go back to their original state of what they regarded or they think as having been their state of security. Their flight back to all forms of irrationalism and existentialisms are today merely the aggravation of the symptoms displayed in traditional religions. In other words, the principle that things must get worse before they get better is as true in religion as in much else in human life. And so I conclude Therefore, in the interests of religion that is mature and a stimulus to continued growth, nothing needs more watching than the tendency to inhibit or discourage the untrammeled functioning of reason or intelligence. One of the best means to counteract such a tendency is the study of the history and psychology of religion. You see, I add also the history of religion. Anthropology is very essential for the understanding of the possibilities of religion. Such a study is indispensable to achieving in religion an attitude that is flexible, mature, free, and creative. A few minutes, breathing spell, and then I shall proceed to answer questions. As I see that some are still writing out the questions, I'll just wait another minute. The first question reads, why do you say we cannot do without religion? Because, as I explained, religion represents that force in the unconscious and in the conscious which does two things. It reinforces the individuality of the individual. That is to say, it gives him the will to live as an individual, to live as long as he can. Secondly, it reinforces in the individual two things: the coordination and harmonization of all the parts of which he consists, and so makes him organic on the one hand in relation to himself, and at the same time develops and reinforces in him the drives which express themselves in terms of belonging, of wanting to be a part of a larger self, of a larger society. Now, we cannot do in human life, we cannot bring out in ourselves and in others the best that is in them without appealing to this will to live, to be an individual, to have self-respect, as we say, let us say. Now, that's an appeal to the individual. On the other hand, if he has no desire to belong, or he feels no responsibility for others, then he is not a social being, and he certainly will not do his best or be his best. That is why I say we cannot do without religion. The next, if you maintain that religion has always functioned as a means of validating those in power, how would you explain the vigilant struggle of the Hebrew prophets against the tyrannical established order of their day? Well, it is the case of the exception proving the rule. That is to say, the fact that there arose prophets simply means that certain individuals of the human race matured earlier than others, and they realized that this function of validating power, which was a function, by the way, discharged by the priests of their day. That is why they condemned the priests. Their struggle, the struggle of the great prophets, is a struggle against the priesthood, because the priesthood functioned in the usual fashion of validating the power. Now, these great prophets were individuals, we call them mutations in biology, that is, forerunners of new species. In this case, a new species of human beings, more mature human beings. How does man come to be mature? Not all human beings become mature at once. First, one, two, rare individual. Then others, a few more follow. Then there is perhaps a complete forgetting of what they said. As a matter of fact, despite the prophecy, despite the teachings of the prophets, and the same applies even in the case of Jesus, and despite all his teachings, when it fell into the hands of so-called priests, they used the very authority of these teachers to go on with the early function of religion, that of validating the existing authorities. But as I say again, these prophets simply are the forerunners or anticipations of the maturation of the human being. What should be the reaction of a mature person professing a mature religion toward unjust suffering, unearned misery, and death? From the standpoint of mature religion, these facts of life are a challenge to try to change the conditions insofar as they are amenable to change, and to make the best of a situation where it is not amenable to change. All suffering outside death, misery, poverty, sickness, are all remediable evils. And the function of mature religion should be to regard their presence, not from the standpoint of what they mean in terms of the cosmos, but simply from the standpoint of our duty to eliminate them. That is all, to change the world, to change that environment. And that creative drive to change them, which of course, as you well know, is taking hold of more and more human beings, that is itself the functioning of Godhood. That is deity. As for the fact of death, I mean, that is part of nature. The only way nature knows of enabling a species to continue to grow and so on is to kill off generation after generation. And it is simply for the human being to accept that fact and to make the most of his life while he is alive, and to see that when he's gone, the world shall be at least the better for his having lived in it. Now, that fact, that is a mature attitude toward the fact of death. Any other attitude that tries to explain it on the grounds of sin or wickedness or as punishment is still in the area of childishness. What is the difference between an emperor who regards himself as a god and the psychotic who claims to be Napoleon or even God? Is it because the first comes from a superior caste or class and can muster a following? What do they have which the psychotic lacks? Well, they have on their side a good deal of what we call the sense, the reality principle, which is lacking in the case of the psychotic. That is to say, take the Mikado, who regards himself as a descendant, as a deity or a descendant of a deity. His people accept that, and they adjust themselves to that situation. And by adjusting themselves to that situation, they are to a large extent enabled to live together and work and have pleasure in the world and achieve a degree of happiness, certainly not as much as they might do, and not in relation, let us say, to a larger world for which this conception is already outgrown and archaic. But within the limits of their own world, the reality principle is conformed to in the case of those rulers who regard themselves as gods or descendants of gods. Please remember that what a god meant to the ruler, the sane ruler who considered himself a god, is not the same as what he means to even the psychotic or the world in which the psychotic lives. When the psychotic says he is a god, he speaks in terms of his environment, and insofar as he defies that environment and defies the reality principle, he is considered psychotic. You see, this touches upon, in general, the whole question of what constitutes normality or health from a mental point of view. The only answer that can be given is the extent to which we reckon with the reality principle. Now you will ask, what is reality? Well, without entering into the metaphysics of it, the answer is, if it leads to better adjustment to life and better human relations, then we have a pragmatic test of reality, and that is the only way in which we can know to what extent a person lives up to it. The next, in what way is the father complex evidenced in the Jewish tradition? Well, insofar as the Jewish tradition stresses the duty of obedience, unquestioning obedience to the law and to those who speak in the name of the law, it is still an evidence of the, you have here an evidence of the father complex. A statement, for example, like that which you find in rabbinics, namely, that if the sages, that is, those who are authorized to interpret the law, say of left that it is right and of right that it is left, you've got to accept it. These are the very words in which authority is commanded. Now, to that extent, traditional religion is an evidence of the father complex. What, in your opinion, is the mature concept of religion? I believe I've answered that in the course of the previous questions, in answering the previous questions. Why do you suppose there is an interest today in the philosophy of existentialism? Or what is existentialism? Existentialism is one of two things. It is either that you deny everything that has to do with ideas as such, other than those which simply articulate what you yourself feel and experience as an immediate reality, and therefore it finds expression in an absolute atheism like that of Sartre, or it is based on the idea that what exists is evil. We know to be, for the most part, corrupt, abnormal, sinful. This is the fact. And the only way in which it is possible ever to rise above it or to be delivered from it is through some supernatural force or God. That is the religious existentialism. And the only evidence from the standpoint of this religious existentialism of the working of a higher power is traditional religion. Therefore, we've got to go back to traditional religion and to all that it has taught, in all literalness, to be redeemed of this body of the death. That is the reason for this religious existentialism. And people are interested in it because they are very sensitive to the reality of evil in the world. And they find only two ways of escaping that evil, either upon depending entirely upon yourself and denying all other sources of, or all other ways of minimizing that evil, or on the other hand, the very opposite, recognizing your own absolute incapacity to deal with the evil, and the only source to which you can appeal for relief is that God that has been revealed to us in traditional religion. The next is, would you say the yeshiva child of today, subject as he is to the advanced group teaching and personality training instituted by the English department, is likely to be a neurosis victim? If he has a highly intellectual mind, if his reason and intelligence are strong, I'm afraid he's liable to be a neurosis victim. On the other hand, if his intelligence is average or below average, he's bound to remain unharmed. This is an actual situation. It isn't, I've known actually of cases of that kind. And so it seems to me that if the school knows what it is good, it should admit or make a requirement a low IQ. Did not Samuel the prophet oppose the formation of a monarchy in Israel? How did the change occur from an authoritarian religion to one of validating authority? This is not a correct interpretation of the place of Samuel in the story. What happened was, is this. There came a time in the life of our people when a change took place in the type of leadership, in a more primitive stage of leadership, not only in our own people, but in every people on the face of the earth. The one that is leader is the one who shows a natural gift, what is known as charisma, as I indicated in the course of my remarks. One who displays superior mental powers, superior emotional powers, powers over people. There is the natural born leader. Before Samuel, you have the judges, so-called. The judges were inspired leaders. They were not chosen by the people. There was no such a thing as choosing a leader. But they were accepted by the people on the basis of their extraordinary personal traits, which were naturally regarded as divine, as coming from God. With the demand on the part of our ancestors for a king, a political change had taken place in the life of our people. They felt that to depend upon that kind of leadership rendered the nation subject to a great deal of danger in time of crisis, because suppose the enemy invaded and no such inspired leader presented himself. The best thing, therefore, is to have a regularly appointed leader who will be there In case of any crisis, you can fall back on his leadership. Naturally, he would have to be approved, and he is approved. Saul is approved. Of a dynasty, that is the dangerous thing that Samuel opposes. A kingship in the sense of an institution which did away with the rise of these natural-born leaders. And that is regarded in the Bible itself as a rejection of God. This is what God is represented as saying to Samuel. It is not thee that they have rejected, but not Samuel, not the prophet. It is me that they have rejected, says God, insofar as they ask for a king. And the prophets regarded in general the institution of kingship as an institution introduced under the influence of the surrounding peoples, and as a rejection of God's own leadership, as a backward step. As a matter of fact, as we now look back to the past, we realize that it constituted simply a greater political development. But like all improvement in secular development, in secular life, it was accompanied by a deterioration in the spiritual life. And this is what happened with the establishment of the kingship. The next question. Can one draw the conclusion from your remarks that Reformed Judaism is a more intelligent form of religion? No, you can't draw from my remarks, because I have not dealt with the question specifically of Reformed Judaism. The principle in Reformed Judaism is not the primacy of reason or intelligence as such. There are other factors that have to be reckoned with, but by and large, one cannot say that Reformed Judaism, for example, in contrast with secularist Judaism or with conservative Judaism, is more rational or more subject to the principle of reality. As a matter of fact, Reformed Judaism indulged in illusion to a larger extent even than Orthodox Judaism, insofar, for example, as it exchanged the hope of regaining Palestine and substituted for it the mission idea, that of converting the whole world to Judaism. That was the basis on which Isaac M. Wise founded the Reform movement. He actually expected, I've come across in his writings, expected that the time would come when the American people would recognize that Judaism was a true religion. Well, that hardly argued much of a sense of reality, and on the contrary showed a great deal of self-delusion. Of course, again, Reformed Judaism is not a static thing. It has developed. It is no doubt that by this time it has certainly become more realistic, and so has conservative Judaism, and so certainly has secularist, Zionist Judaism. So that there we would have to take up another course and discuss Judaism. Does not the strict adherence to the kosher laws fit into the victims of neurosis principle which you discussed in your outline, along with the observance of other taboos? If the kosher laws are observed in the spirit of tradition, namely as a religious taboo, as a prohibition commanded by God. In that sense, it is an evidence of immaturity in religion. But on the other hand, there are many institutions that have come down from the past which have come to achieve a function that perhaps was not at all contemplated by them when they were first established. In that case, this new function which they achieved is itself, maybe itself be so important that it would be valuable to retain those institutions as a means to achieving the new function. To be concrete, the kosher laws originally had no other intention than being a sort of religious taboo in the spirit of ancient types of taboo. But in actuality, they have come to provide content for Jewish living under circumstances when the lack of content would have been a great danger. Lack of self-expression as Jews would have been a great danger if the average person, not only the scholar, had no direct means of expressing himself as a Jew, there would have been no Jewish life, no Jewish people. In that way, there came about the result that is often referred to as its function, namely that of acting as a sort of unifying factor among all Jews. Well, it has had that result. And if we value that result, and use the entire institution of kashrut as a means to it, at the same time adding also that other interpretation of the kashrut already in earliest times, namely as a means of sanctification, self-sanctification, there's no reason why it should not be used for these purposes any more than any language symbol, language as such, which inherently is irrationalistic. I mean, why the word religion should mean religion, why this should be called a desk or a table and this light, and not licht and not tish. And I mean, these are purely arbitrary things, but after they have been in service for a number of ages, throughout the ages, they perform an indispensable function of self-expression. Therefore, insofar as kashrut has served as a means of self-expression, I, for one, would say that such laws, such practice should have been instituted if there hadn't existed any. We needed, especially in the diaspora, where the content of Jewish life is very thin. Of course, I don't mean to imply that I would have every tittle of the kashrut traditional law maintained. That is impracticable and unnecessary. The kashrut law should be revised very radically, but that there should be something about the home that would give it a Jewish atmosphere, and kashrut can act as such. By itself, no, but if joined, for example, to some ritual practice which would explain their function and their use. In the few words of grace, if some word were said why this is a kosher meal, for why we observe this practice, then it would have a very useful function. The next question: would you define religion as accepting joys and sorrows without question, whether just or unjust? No, that itself is not religion. That's just resignation. That is a sort of despair, if you will. No, I would define religion as accepting joys and sorrows as opportunities for personal and social growth. If you accept them as opportunities, as challenges for growth in character, in strength, in help, in love, then that is religion. The next question. I know intelligent people who say that it is inconceivable to think that upon the death of a person, he dies wholly and completely, that his spirit or something must go on. Is that an immature need for comfort, or do you also believe in some form of continuity after death? I feel that the belief in the personal, individual survival of the individual person as such is a form of immaturity, because it is simply in complete defiance of the reality principle. I mean, I don't want to enter into the simple questions that naturally suggest themselves with regard to the very absurdity of surviving as a person, which is determined, that is determined by all the circumstances and all the factors in the environment, surviving as such a person when all of those factors are absent. You become a different, the very same person, even if there were no such thing as death, if the world would change as radically as it does change, it'd become a different person and almost forget that he had lived in this kind of a world. So that in terms of reality principle, it doesn't mean anything. However, the idea of the influence of the individual surviving in the hereafter a person passes from the earthly scene, that is a natural fact. And whatever we do to make the world better for our having lived in it is itself our immortality. And that's a natural, understandable immortality which mature religion should teach us to strive for. When you say religion, do you mean organized religion or a personal mode of living and moral standards? I haven't been to the previous lectures. Well, you see, I mean by religion two things, as I explained, is implied in this lecture. Religion as a social phenomenon and religion as personal experience. And I've indicated in what way, as organized religion, it functions as a means of validating authority. As a means of personal experience, it expresses itself through all these beliefs and ideas which have to grow, but which are prevented from growing by reason of its being rooted in an authoritative kind of society. I understand that you are associated with the Jewish Theological Seminary. Accordingly, you are more intimately concerned with this contradiction. How do you reconcile these seemingly irreconcilable forces in your lecture to future religious leaders without incurring their wrath? I do incur their wrath. Why is it that, that's a natural phenomenon. It's wherein should I expect any less resistance, let us say, than Freud did when he came out with the idea of libido as being the basic drive, or the cause of neurosis, and so on. And people said, threw up their hands in horror. He said, well, that man is sex insane. That, of course, showed that they themselves are naturally repressed. It betrayed their own character. And the same happens, those who are most repressed are the most wrathful. Why is it that the youth of this country, particularly our Jewish youth, brought up in a fine cultural Jewish environment, feel justified in living without any religious belief, and do not wish to inculcate religion in the hearts of their children? Because they have a fixated notion of what religion is, namely that religion is either traditional religion or it's nothing. You either believe in a God who revealed himself at Sinai if you're a Jew, or in a God who became incarnate in Jesus if you're a Christian, and that is the only kind of religion that's religion. I just read a little book called Freud and Christianity, and in the book, a very excellent book, very interesting discussion of relation of religion to psychoanalysis, but the author very nameably cannot even conceive of any other religion than Christianity. Religion and Christianity are to him synonymous. I mean, that kind of thinking is responsible for the reaction of the youth who say, well, since we cannot accept that kind of religion, and since we never apprise the fact that religion is compatible with the reality principle, we'll have none of it. Would you consider the Zionist program with a cultural and spiritual renaissance in Jewish life as its purpose to be an authoritarian movement in Jewish life and religion? Oh, no. I certainly would not consider it as an authoritarian movement. I would say the rabbinate in Israel would like to make it that, but certainly the rabbinate in Israel does not represent the Zionist program. As far as the Zionist program is concerned, which emanates from Herzl and Ahad Ha'am, it is entirely in keeping with what I regard to be mature religion. Well, I think you are tired. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. For more information on the 92nd Street Y, New York, and all of our programs, please visit us at 92ny.org.